Welcome to the Welcome Vitality Podcast. My guest today is Andrew McFarlane. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Andrew is a person who I really respect, and so I wanted to have him on the show and just kind of get into some of his ideas and different things. So Andrew, I wanted to ask you, this word gets thrown out a lot, spirituality. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what that word means, what that encompasses. What does it mean to be spiritual or be on the spiritual path? What's that all about?
So it's actually funny that you bring this up, because I was having a conversation with a friend 2 days ago, kind of about the same idea. And for me, in my experience, it's being someone whose energy is no longer solely invested in the physical and material realms of reality. It's actually coming to a space in your life and with your focus, attention, and how you invest your energy that is beyond that which is changing and impermanent, because part of the laws of the physical reality is that it's always changing. But there is the greater part of us, our deeper identity, that is not changing, right? It's who we are, but we are also both, because life is full of paradoxes. We are physical. We cannot reject our body, because I think sometimes too people can say, okay, I'm on the spiritual path, and they start to either demonize the material world, whether it's money or it's physicality as a whole, and so they become in opposition to that. Whereas for me, it's really about a full integration of all of these things, but also now for us coming into the awareness and the experiential awareness of that which is beyond the physical.
I like what you said about how there's people who push it away, like the material world. And I had this conversation with someone when I was living in Thailand, and I'd been going to this teacher, and he lives in this big house, on the beach. He's really wise, and I look into his eyes, I'm like, man, I want to learn what this guy knows. And I was telling a friend, about him, and he was like, well, he can't be so spiritual, so wise, because he has this big house. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Have you ever heard people say that?
Of course. I think we which is what I've experienced in myself as well. We can get into, you could say, spiritual materialism, right? It's like the conceptualization of what we believe to be spiritual. Whereas now I've gotten into the habit of, I don't judge things that I don't know about or don't understand. It's just not a wise use of my attention or energy. There's a really great story at one point that someone was telling about Osho. I don't recall if he was actually saying it, but in regards to Osho and his experience, a lot of people who are aware of Osho, if you don't know who Osho is, he's a Indian mystic. He had a pretty big following in the United States for a while, and there was controversy around his following in some ways, for many reasons, but in part, one, because he was known as being very almost flamboyant with the amount of materialism that was around him. I think at one point he owned a bunch of Bentleys, and he had these really expensive watches and all these things, right? But if you listen to him speak, the depth of his wisdom is profound. There was a story that someone shared in respect to him, and he said that at one point, before his ashram had become so well known, that he brought one of his students, one of his most trusted devotees, one of his devotees that he knew would never question him, and he basically took the last amount of the money that the ashram had and told this person, go to the Mercedes dealership and go buy a Mercedes, one of the most expensive Mercedes in the space. And sure enough, the person didn't question him and just said, okay, this is what he wants, this is what I'm doing. And so they went to the Mercedes dealership, bought, a CL 500, I think $100,000 Mercedes, and then came back, brought the car to the ashram. And so a lot of people were curious, why did you do this? Why would you spend the last amount of money that we have on this thing? And he said, in essence, it kind of came down to him understanding that some of the people who are the most influential in this world have money and are wealthy. And he knew that if he was going to impact the world, he had to connect to those people. So what happened is the second that he went to the Mercedes dealership, people started going, who are these people at the ashram? And it started to raise awareness about their movement. And so that was a catalyst for him starting to get a lot of people who were more well-to-do into the ashram to then further the mission that he had in his world as far as actually having people who have influence create a more positive change. And so I say all this because we always, as people, part of our tendency is to either believe we understand and we judge, or judge what we don't understand. But either way, our mind is in this framework of ideas of what it's supposed to look like, right? And so I think we can only really know for ourselves what's going on, or we have to be sensitive to the energy of every situation in any given moment to have discernment. But I think just to look at something on the surface and say, oh, this person wears a suit, so they're less spiritual because, they drive a nice car. And this person, they're broke, so just naturally, because they have no money, they must be more spiritual, right? Because you can be in a place, to me in a big way, it's about our attachment to things. Because you can be in a place where you have nothing, but yet in your heart, you're desiring to have so much. You're not content with your situation. You're in anxiety. You have so much turmoil going on inside. And you can be someone who has money or has a house or has whatever it is and not be attached to it at all. And it be totally something that makes no difference in your life or defines you whatsoever. So I think the big question at a certain point comes down to our understanding of the function of things, right? Ram Dass at one point, who is someone I really have a great respect for, he was talking about how on our journey, as we become more conscious, he said, you become aware of how every little action that you take is affecting the entire realm of consciousness in humanity's evolution and all things considering. And so he kind of used this story of a parent, whether or not they hit their child or not. He says, he's like, and it's not important whether or not, to a certain degree, the parent decides to spank their child or not spank their child. What the point is that the parent has the awareness of what the actions they take are and how they're affecting the entire consciousness. I mean, there's all kinds of, if you really get into the history of a lot of, you could say, these spiritual mystics, especially in the yogic tradition, they've been known to do some outlandish things that most people never understand, whether they're like perceived as being gluttons, right? Or perceived as, being overly materialistic, or perceived as being very angry, or whatever it is, right? But in further investigation, oftentimes people find out that these methods of them, they're just doing the thing that needs to be done to break through the veil, right? Mm-hmm. And even another story that I heard recently about, Ramakrishna, another saint, and how he was known as being a glutton, right? He was known as just like having like a fervent appetite for food. And his wife used to be really ashamed of him and really embarrassed and say, you're a spiritual man, you've got all these devotees, you've got all these people following you. He's like, but you just can't seem to have this balancing act in your life when it comes to food. And he said, one day when you prepare this dish for me, some special dish that they always eat, he says, and I turn away and don't accept it, I'm only going to be here for 3 days longer, right? So the way that this whole story was expressed was that in a lot of ways he was utilizing as a mechanism the karma of food to keep himself on the material plane. Because if he didn't decide to have that kind of attachment with the physical world, he would just go. He would just be gone, right? And so that was his method. And there are probably, I would imagine, a myriad of methods by which someone can utilize. And I say all of this kind of in context to what you're asking, for us to always get to the point where we don't think we know everything, we don't know what's going on, and it's also not relevant. What's the relevance of judging whether or not someone's more or less spiritual? Do you feel more spiritual? Like, where does that get you? Like, where it's totally irrelevant.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I guess I've kind of been navigating, trying to find should I listen to this person? Should I listen to this person? Like, there's, so to speak, false gurus out there. Mm-hmm. Like, do you use discernment? Like, is there anything you look for? Like, okay, this guy's definitely not saying something that's true, or is it more your intuition?
I think we always, hopefully, I shouldn't say always, oftentimes we are getting the energetic impulse and hit first. We're getting that feeling before we start to really and sometimes conceptualize things. Now, we may do this more or less depending on how much we trust ourselves in terms of how we act on those feelings. But I know in myself, if there's any theme in my life, it's, oh, you should have trusted your intuition, right? Like, that seems to be a big theme in my life. And so I've just gotten better at just listening to it right away. Something that I'll say that I think is really interesting in respect to your question is, someone told a story about this king who was a great Shiva devotee, right? And he got to the point where someone told him, if you ever meet Shiva, you just do whatever he says, right? And then people in the village got word of this. They found out, oh, if this guy meets Shiva, he's going to do whatever Shiva says. And so a thief came in the garb of Shiva, and he came to the king and he says, sacrifice yourself and you will achieve liberation. And the king said, okay. And guess what? He sacrificed himself and achieved liberation. Because it wasn't about Shiva. It was never about the guru. It's not about these other teachers. It's about you. It's about you. It's about you and your sincerity. So no one can take away your learning. No one can take away your evolution. Right? When you are sincere, you will learn what you're meant to learn, and you will grow in the way that you're meant to grow. It's not about the teacher. That's just another projection outside of you to believe that somebody has something that you need. But the thing that's interesting, that's being born in any state of reverence, as long as, from my perspective, there is the awareness, there is the knowing that it's actually about you birthing reverence. It's like somebody said, like, God doesn't need your devotion. God doesn't need your praise. God doesn't need you need that so you can open, like the flower.
Yeah, I get that. Very interesting. So you talked about learning to trust your intuition. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of abstract. So, like, what are some practical ways that, someone listening can learn to trust their own intuition?
I mean, feeling is everything, right? It's like you're always getting the messages, right? And so I find, in kind of the example I was using, through trial and error, I've learned that, I had a feeling, whether it's about a person or a situation or a path, I had a feeling that I either listened to or didn't listen to. And so oftentimes, in more practical sense, I found that part of our own evolution and our path is sometimes we just learn that some things work and certain things don't work, right? It's like, if I go this way or if I do this thing and I don't trust myself and I don't trust the feelings that I have, then it usually ends up in discomfort or pain or suffering, right? And when I do trust myself, there might be some initial discomfort because I'm kind of growing into myself, but the lasting state of happiness and peace and joy that I maintain is much more profound. And naturally what I've found, just like anything, it's like the analogy that I've used is like your intuition is kind of like some person calling you, right? And if you don't answer the phone, you might stop hearing the phone ring and they may even stop calling you, right? And so I find that your sensitivity to yourself, your own feeling, through things like meditation and just natural introspection and sincere interest increases like anything else. Our attention is energy. It's like water. Anything that you put your attention on, no matter what it is, grows. That's just the way that life is and energy moves. Your attention is water. It nurtures whatever it's focused on.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. For me, I've never heard it put that way. That's awesome. I know that. For me, it's hard to focus my attention. I get distracted. And especially, like, listening to my intuition, like you said, sometimes you didn't listen. So, like, why don't we listen?
We don't listen because we have the concept that, we have things like loss aversion. We always project, right? One, we have a lot of conditioning. So we have this whole framework, these ideas of what we believe are going to make us happy, right? So it looks like, either the big house on the hill or the beautiful wife or the big career or all these things that we believe, right? We have this story and we forget that it's about the feeling. I'm attempting, the reason I'm moving towards this thing or moving away from this thing is because at the end of the day, I want to experience a feeling, right? So oftentimes we don't listen is because we don't actually believe that the initial feeling that we're experiencing of don't go this way, go that way, we don't believe that it's going to lead to that conceptual image of whatever we believe is also going to bring us happiness. So there's just a discontinuity, and a lot of that comes back to fundamentally the reason we don't trust ourselves is because we don't trust life. Why don't we trust life? Because we don't know what we are and we don't know what life is, right? So a lot of things we experience are really just delineations of a fundamental ignorance, right? Whether it's the fear of death, right? Which we fear death because we don't know what we are and we don't know what life is, right? We actually believe ourselves fundamentally to be disconnected from life. And so to say you're disconnected from life is I'm disconnected from myself because I am life. So I don't trust life. I don't trust life outside. I don't trust how I feel because the things that I'm feeling are quite literally irrational. They don't make sense to the mind because they don't move in a linear fashion. We've been conditioned to think in progressive steps. If I do this, then this will happen. And if I want to be safe and secure, because once again, I have this fear of death, I'm trying to make sure I navigate the world in a rational sense, as opposed to, I have this feeling like I should just give this thing away. Like I don't need this thing right now. Oh, but what if you need it? What if later on you're going to regret that thing? We don't trust that initial impulse. But the thing that we come to realize is that is the source of power. That is the source of abundance, right? That feeling of where more life is expressing itself. And life is here to support itself as well. Life is here to express itself. I tell people, these things inside of you didn't come from you. It's not like you sat there and said, oh, I'm in a closet of things that I can decide. What's my life pattern? How do I want to feel? And what do I want to think? No, it doesn't work that way in reality. If you're observant and and you have and you're perceptive, you see that these things just arise in you. This feeling arises in you. And if you start to ask yourself the question, where did this come from? Where does it really come from? Where did this feeling to do this thing come from? It didn't come from you. Well, when you realize it actually came from life, then you realize that it's also already fulfilled. It's already done. Because life, especially what you'll also realize is oftentimes these feelings that are intuitive and that come from the heart are inclusive. They include other people. They include all aspects of life. They are not exclusive. They're not just about you. And that's one way to discern whether or not it's your intuition or if it's something that's beyond and a part of and connected to life, because it's actually acknowledging all of life. And so just like the seed is already a tree, right? But the seed might go, ooh, I'm a seed and I don't know if I want to get in the soil. Okay, it's raining on me. I might drown. And yeah, there's a transformation process. But inside of the seed already knows that there's something to be done. There's some journey to be had. The inside and outside are all reflective, as I say, as above, so below, in and out. It's all the same. If you want to see yourself, if you want to see the laws of nature inside of yourself, also you can observe outside of yourself the process. We all have seasons inside. We go through times that are dark. We actually have, these springs. We have summer. We have abundant times. We have times where we go through all of it. It's interesting when you can see it that way, when you start to begin to see it.
There's no bad emotions.
There's no bad anything. What is bad?
Things we don't want.
Yes, right. There's things that are bad for us.
Exactly.
This is
bad for me.
Right. This is bad for me, but we can get definitely, like, I've seen us, and definitely for me in my youth, very absolutist and very live in this hierarchy of knowing what's good, what's bad, what's right and wrong, and I've just found at this point it's a very simple way of looking at life. It experientially doesn't ring true for me anymore. I more so subscribe to and experience life as having laws, things like cause and effect, right? If I do something, if I take this stone and I drop it, it's going to hit the ground, right? That's a law. That's a cause and effect. I did something and something else happened. Now I might drop it and it might land on my foot, but I can then go, oh, the stone is bad. It broke my toe. The stone is indifferent. The law is indifferent. It's just there is a happening. And then because I didn't have a preference for that pain, then I say that's bad. But that's also very myopic. It's like focalizing my attention to, one myopic point of view at a certain point, and then creating a absolute story about this situation, which we tend to do. That's, another part of human nature is we believe we're in any situation, whether it's good or bad, and we say, this is going to last forever, right? We just project all the way into eternity, whatever it is that's happening, but if we watch, we see that it's all changing all the time. And so getting back to even your initial question, what does it mean to be spiritual? It's actually moving into a state of being that is transcendent of all of that which is changing, the good and the bad. Because we get really into the good. I think part of even our spiritual thing is like the ideological good, right? Right? Like we're almost like pursuing this joy, but it's like another high, right? As opposed to actually finding freedom, right? Freedom which is transcendent of all that is changing. And in that dimension, there is supreme bliss. It's a different kind of thing. It's not getting high anymore. It's being high. The sky. It's like you're not getting high.
You just are high.
You are it. You are the thing that is spacious beyond. Yeah.
I see a lot, going back to kind of what I mentioned about teachers that are maybe not saying pure truth. And I like what you said, how you said it's not about the teacher, it's about like tuning in with yourself and your own intuition. I 100% agree with that. And I also think there's a lot of people who are not hearing what you're saying and are going out to teachers and saying like, tell me everything. And it's just something of my own observation. I'd like to know what you think is, it seems to be a lot of teachers in terms of masculinity and femininity in this new spiritual movement that are very feminine, very like just go with the flow and like airy-fairy, like kind of like this. Like I see a lot of that, and I just wanted to like get your perspective on what that's all about. Maybe masculine, feminine. Can you talk about that?
I don't know that I've had that observation, so it's kind of hard for me to speak on it. Like I haven't seen this. Well, first, in hearing what you're saying, my first question is, who are these teachers? Like who are these people? Is it like people who are self-proclaimed, I'm a teacher, or is it people? Because I have just in general, what made me want to bring that up is I just personally, I don't know that I love that terminology of teacher, because it once again creates a hierarchy. It creates this idea of someone who knows something that someone else doesn't know, right? And so, at one point I just kept reflecting in that the greatest teachers are actually the most sincere students in disguise, right? So there might be people out there who are guides. There might be people out there who have been along the path. There might be people who have seen some things, experienced some things that you might have not yet. But they don't believe themselves to be something that you are. It's like one sunflower is fully open and fully blossoming, and it knows what the sun looks like and feels like in its full radiance. And then there's another sunflower and it's opening. Another sunflower doesn't look and say, you're not me, and like, let me teach you. It's like, oh, we're all the same. We're just at different parts of the journey. And so I can kind of guide you as to things you want to watch out for and things you might want to explore as you go through your opening. Beautiful. But I don't know that I love the term teacher, and it could be a personal thing that I have a qualm with, or just this idea of hierarchy. So I can speak on that, but I don't know. I don't know if I know exactly what you're saying in regards to this like feminine nature being overly pronounced. I haven't experienced that in my personal journey with people who I'd say have been guides for me on the path. Is yes, there is probably more of this feminine quality than we experience in most men, if we are talking about men. But I don't experience it in a way that is imbalanced, and saying that, because right now, because of our culture, we live in such a masculine culture, and as a dominant energy throughout the world, there is so much of this yang masculine energy that anything that maybe even might have the hint of balance might look so extremely feminine to those who have the goggles of man, or I should say more masculine. It's just so unfamiliar that it looks, extremely feminine when it may be even more imbalanced. But I don't know exactly, once again, coming back to initially, I don't know the vision or how what brought you to that question and what energy you're actually touching on. I can only speak as far as what I've seen.
Yeah, so let me try to clarify like what I'm talking about. I agree that there's like a major imbalance towards the masculine like in our culture. And I mean, I could be wrong about this just from my own personal observation. It seems like in the, so to speak, spiritual community that men, talking about men, tend to go over to the other, way over into the feminine.
Sure.
And I was asking you because you fully embody the masculine. Like I look at you, I'm like, yep, that's a man. And so I wanted to kind of get your perspective on like what that's about. Maybe you could describe like to you what that means. Like what would, if someone were to say to you, like, what does the phrase being a man mean to you? Like what would you say?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. I think what feels more resonant is because there's like, we can fall into societal, once again, conditioning of what does it mean to be a man. I'm more so considering, yes, there is, obviously we have to honor our biology because that's a dimension of us biologically. We're men, and then we move into more masculine energy. So the masculine, the first thing that comes to me is the steadiness, right? You use this term in terms of like watery and whatever you want when you describe the feminine. So you can say, as part of an analogy, the feminine is the water. The masculine is the space that is held and holding that water and allowing that water to flow. And in order to have balance, you need both, right? You actually, even when we look at the ocean still has its borders, whether it's the beach or the bottom of the sea or whatever it is. That is where the masculine and the feminine meet and support one another. So in terms of, for me, what does it mean to be a man? It's first being human, right? Like for anybody, I think it's important that we don't get too, because the danger of even this question, if we don't acknowledge the whole, is men can get into the two-dimensional nature of the masculine. Whereas for me, I think being a man, what does it mean to be a man is not actually that far off from what it means to be a woman, right? There are definitely differences in terms of natural disposition, but we are more similar than we are different because we are both human. And so I think for anybody who's hearing this, whether you're a man or a woman, first we have to acknowledge our humanity and come to our identity, which we could say our spiritual identity, which is beyond the physical, beyond the body. And that energy has no masculinity or femininity. Okay, now moving into the next layer, right, which is the masculine. It's to be steady, to be clear, discerning. To me, the word stillness comes to mind. But once again, for me, it also feels in this moment, don't love defining these things in this way because I think people can take them too far, right? To think it's only that, right? Because I can get into this point where stillness becomes rigidity. It becomes rigid when you're trying to conceptualize the embodiment of stillness, right? Because we all, in our natural place, we swing in different dimensions of that. You could say yang energy as a natural point. So what does it mean to be a man? Define that. And then someone says, okay, well, I'm working on being a man, so let me just try to move into these qualities. And that's not really how it works. Which is why, for me, first and foremost, it's being authentic, feeling, listening, and expressing that. And then what I see now, which is in a lot of ways what's happened in our culture and society, is we've become this really characterization of man and masculine, which has become this like hyper masculinity to the point of it really not being real masculinity. It's like this idea of masculinity where men don't cry, men don't feel, men don't nurture, men don't listen, men don't have any aspect of the feminine in them to balance their masculinity, to make them a whole human being. And so in some ways too, I've seen it with the feminine, as some women have become, ditzy. Oh, I don't know. I can't do anything for myself. I have no power. Like, you tell me what I want. I don't know anything. And that's not femininity. That's not, to me, what that is. They're both extremely powerful in their fullness. They definitely are different, but they're both all of embody the essence of power. So first and foremost, being a man for me feels like being balanced, being both, being connected to the feminine parts of you, the creative parts of you, the nurturing parts of you, and also being connected to the parts of you that embody strength, power, will, right, discernment, outward energy, motion, but with clarity, not just abrupt movement and action because you believe that's what a man does. Not overpowering, real empowerment, power of self, right? No power that is over anything else. It's not an overbearing or dominant energy. It is an energy that is so strong and so powerful that it doesn't have any need or desire to even express or exercise its power, because that in a lot of ways is a weakness.
Yeah.
The strongest people in the world, you may never ever come to know how strong they are. You may never know. There was this one time I was thinking about water, and I was thinking, the water's so peaceful. Like, you look at a river, the water's flowing so nicely. It's only until a rock is placed in its way that you see the power of that river bearing down on that rock, and you actually experience and you see how strong that river is. But you actually don't have any perception of it until there's any barriers. And so a lot of times, most people, because they're in a place where they're actually so powerful, they don't live a life where there are barriers. There's nothing to even overcome, because it's all just falling by the wayside naturally. It's like the person, if we use it in physical terms, that you almost never want to get into a fight with, so this person never has to fight.
Right. You're so good at fighting, you never
have to fight. It's like almost paradoxical. But then the people you always see struggling and like having to exercise it, that just, unfortunately, it comes from insecurity, and it's sad. And a lot of times the people that we see is, once again, these quote unquote alpha males out there externally, they're not the real people who are leading things. One of my favorite quotes on leadership is said that a leader is never chosen, a leader is recognized, right? So in our societal terms, we're choosing people, we're electing people, we're doing this whole thing, but those aren't the real leaders, not as far as life is concerned, and the people who have deep spiritual and human influence. Other people might be able to influence in terms of their fear and things, and people trying to avoid, someone murdering them or something. But to actually be able to influence and inspire someone's growth, that's real power. That's not worldly power.
I like what you said about people who are out there trying to show how strong they are, or like, like that. That's not real power.
Right.
I watched this video of yours on your YouTube channel, and it's about intelligence. And you said people who aren't happy and who aren't healthy can't call themselves intelligent.
Mm.
And that for me was like, I completely agree with that. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. It's so funny. I was actually having this conversation with someone yesterday. And the thing that brought this to my attention was I was speaking to a friend, and they referred to someone, and they said, oh, this person's so smart, they're so intelligent. And I just responded by asking that question. I said, are they happy? Are they healthy? And they said, no, but they know a lot about things. And I said, well, if you have a bunch of inapplicable knowledge, how could, if you fundamental to your life, these are things that are fundamental to your life, is your happiness and your health, and these two things are also connected, because obviously the healthier you are, the more you can support your own happiness. It just doesn't, it's just something that's so basic to me at this point that it's hard to argue. Where is this knowledge getting you? You know a lot about something that has no significance. You know everything about everything that doesn't matter.
It's like the way you say it. It's so true.
It's very basic.
Yeah.
And something too that I would say is that anybody who has who actually is intelligent, or I should say more so that intelligence is functioning correctly in their consciousness, they will realize how much they don't know, and it will point them back to life. It's not a coincidence. People don't realize that a lot of the people like Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein, who are known for their great scientific achievements, most people do not know how deeply spiritual and tapped into the other worlds and other realms that they actually were. Most people have no idea. If you do some research on people like Nikola Tesla, you will be blown away, because he speaks like a mystic. He doesn't speak like a scientist. Because all of the knowledge and information that he got into the laws of the universe and how things work came from deeper realms that he was connected to. And then he brought them here and expressed them. It's the same thing with Einstein. It's the same thing with most people who are intelligent in a way that is revolutionary. It doesn't come from this world. It doesn't come from time. Most people, what they're doing is, in terms of calling themselves intelligent, is they're seeing the puzzle pieces that are on the board, and they're just rearranging them, right? People who have deep knowledge, deep awareness, deep intelligence, they're bringing a whole new puzzle to the board. They're bringing a whole new game. They're not even playing in the same paradigm. They're not gaining their information based on what was previously known, because everything that's previously known is the past. And when you have intelligence and you just know about things, that's the past. That's not actually thinking, right? That's not thinking. That is becoming aware of something and remembering that thing, and then reiterating the thing that you once heard. It's not intelligence. It's a completely different thing.
Very interesting. We're taught that way, though, in school, to memorize. So it's not really our fault. It's like, here's the test, and these are the things you need to remember.
Sure.
So it's hard to get out of that, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And it's not about fault, it's not about blame and saying, oh, it's, anybody's fault. It's just kind of, hopefully through this conversation, becoming aware of it, right? Because awareness is everything. And some people are aware of these things, even though they are taught to memorize and regurgitate and take tests and all that. And some people are aware the entire time. There's something that's very uninspiring about this and not dynamic and true to life. I felt that way very much when I was growing up in school, which is why I kind of did my best to spend as little time in school as possible, because I felt like I actually wasn't learning. I felt like this was holding me back.
Yeah, I felt that way too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I don't feel like, that's extremely unique. I think it's just some people, once again, listen to their intuition and do something about it. And some people, usually out of fear and conditioning and the desire to be accepted and, excel in their career, just kind of play the game, and they just want to win at that game. The tricky thing is that with certain games, even if you win, you lose. And to me, that's kind of one of those games. That is like, if you win at living someone else's life, guess what? You still lost.
Yeah, I agree. Well, what would you say to someone, because we just kind of agreed that someone who's not healthy, not happy, is not intelligent.
Sure.
Like, someone could be listening to this and think, well, I'm not really that healthy and I'm definitely not happy. Like, what do you mean I'm not intelligent? Like, what would you say to someone who might take that personally or is kind of would disagree to that and say, like, it's not my intelligence, it's not about my intelligence, like, I had bad genes or I had the bad luck or, like, whatever reasons they might have.
I think the big thing to me in this is not to be identified with it anyway. It's not to be identified with being intelligent or stupid. It's like, because I don't look at myself and say, oh, I'm so intelligent. It's like, I don't have time to even think about myself that way. I'm too interested in other things. So it's really more a matter of contextualizing intelligence. Like, what is intelligence and what ultimately, if it's functioning properly, would it lead to? Anybody who's in a place where they're identified of saying, you know, I'm not happy or healthy, but I'm intelligent. I'm not into arguing or convincing people of anything, you know, and also it feels unfortunate if someone is getting defensive because that's not the point of any of this. The point for you and I feel having this conversation is hopefully to offer people a greater insight into just the workings of life and their own awareness, not for them to be in an argument with people who actually aren't arguing with them.
Right. That's a good answer. So, there's a good place for us to wrap up. Oh, before we do, I want to talk about Give Love Project.
Awesome.
Yeah, because maybe you can just tell us what it is briefly, and then
for sure.
Yeah.
Depending on how much time we have, because I can go in the long version or the short version. But the first thing I'll say is for people who want to learn more, you can just go to www.giveloveproject.com. This is something that for me has been in my heart for a long time. I was meditating about 7 years ago and then had this really profound feeling to do a project centered around giving, because I know that giving is the source of our internal and external abundance. Right? A lot of people want to know, okay, well, how do I become happier? Or how do I make more money? Okay, well, give. You know, like, become someone who is overflowing with energy, and then life will fill you up more and more. When I first had this feeling to create this project, I thought, you know, maybe I'll do a documentary where I go on this journey of giving and I'll interview people about giving. And as things evolved and life happened, 5-6 years later, as I kept meditating on this project and how it would manifest, it came about that I felt called to create a giving chain. So we have this necklace with a pendant that says "Give Love" on it, with a palm facing outward with a heart in the center, and then on the back side of the chain there is an envelope. And so we're asking people to write letters to humanity, whatever they feel called to share. It could be their wisdom, it could be love letters, it could be whatever they feel inspired, something personal to them. And on the letter itself, there's a tracking number. So somebody writes their letter, they put it inside the chain, they get to wear it for a period of time until they feel inspired to give that message to someone else. And they give it to that person, and they tell that person to do the same. And so then their letter can travel all around the world from person to person to person, and they can see it online because we have that tracking system, so they can go and see, hey, where's my letter now, and what is this person saying about it? And for me, this is I loved the opportunity to actually have a physical manifestation for the way that our giving ripples out, because it happens energetically anyway. At one point, I became very aware of in my life a lot of the habits that I have even centered around giving. I started to think back and reflect on where I picked them up. Some of them came and they were inspired just by life itself, but then some I remember just like observing my stepfather, observing my mother, observing certain people around me, and just the way that they interface with life and how they were really generous in some ways, and how good I felt being in that field and just feeling that. And so that happens, and I realized that we have the opportunity to really change people's lives. Like, everything that I look at the world and I think everything that we're experiencing is just based on the agreements we've made, right? We just have this idea. We've made it all up, whether it's the government or business or whatever societal thing. Okay, you're going to stop at this stop sign with this white line, and people go, okay, cool, we're going to do it, right? That's what we're going to do. It's just a bunch of collective agreements, right? And it was really intriguing to me as well, because I have another friend who's Israeli, and he was talking about how in their culture, they don't block their Wi-Fi. Nobody's Wi-Fi is blocked. everybody's Wi-Fi is open because as far as they're concerned, someone can be in a situation where it's an emergency and they need Wi-Fi and it's open. And for us in the States or people who are American, everybody's Wi-Fi is blocked. It's just unknown. It's like, we don't have that agreement. We don't have that social agreement. We block our Wi-Fi. So I just kept asking myself, I was like, why is that so fundamentally different where two different cultures, everybody's got Wi-Fi, but one culture's perspective on it is so completely different and contrasting to the other. And just knowing that, I know that we can create different kinds of agreements. We can create agreements where loving one another and connecting to one another and giving to one another is the agreement that we have. Because I know that that's the agreement we want to express in our hearts. That's the vision that life has for us. And so to me, this project is really just a manifestation of that. It's a move in that direction.
So I know you write these letters yourself and give them to people.
Yeah.
So like, what was the last one you wrote?
The last one I wrote, actually gave away, was it yesterday, the day before? It was a thank you letter. It was just a long list of saying thank you for little things like, thank you for any time you smiled at a stranger and didn't want anything in return. Thank you for any time you opened the door for someone and let them in before you. Thank you for, pretty much anytime you've been, I want to acknowledge, because I know so many of us out there, we do things that nobody sees, right? Like I know in my life that's happened all the time. And just to acknowledge that we're all there and we're all in this together, it's a beautiful thing. So thank you for any time, not that everyone's all good or anyone's all bad, right? But just anytime you've had the intention to do something beautiful in the world, I just acknowledge that and thank you for doing that. So that was the essence of that message.
So I know, like, also people can go on the website giveloveproject.com and they can, if they receive the chain, they can like write a comment about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said that. Like, did you ever get like a comment back, like from a chain that you gave away and then it kind of passed on and you saw that like happen?
I honestly, more so through social media, like I see people doing things on Instagram where my brother-in-law, he had a chain that he gave to someone, I don't even remember when, and then he was at this other place in Venice and he saw some guy wearing it. He didn't know it was his though. He didn't know it was his. It had gone through like a number of people before it ended up with this other guy, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's so crazy to see this person who's now wearing this thing." It's really profound to feel, especially something so personal that either you've been wearing on your body for a while or something that you wrote down, go and move around and then come back to you. Is like, it's really crazy. So more so in that sense, I've witnessed it. I haven't gone on the site and like been searching every day and seeing what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I've been wearing mine for 3 months, and it's nice. Just, it's like, you never know. I never know. Like, it's today the day I'm going to give it away. Like, who am I going to give it to?
Yeah.
Like,
something else that made me think about this too is I feel like so often I'll have interactions with people in public, whether I'm, at some juice bar or wherever I am in traffic, or I could be anywhere, and I might just have a moment where I start talking to someone and we just end up in this really sincere and profound conversation, or we might just have like a little moment that's so beautiful. And then I thought, man, this is really great to have something on my body to kind of even expand upon that love that I feel in that moment, to give someone a totem that they can, an experiential totem that they can remember this moment by, just to even make it even more special, whether they get to sit and read something that's personal to this person, or maybe even wasn't mine but was somebody else's. It's just, I love, to me, giving, it's like a superpower. It's like magic. It's like you literally can change. You can just decide that you're going to change someone's life, and you can just do it. Like you. It's
true.
Yeah.
So when you give it to them, do you read it to them, or you just, like, do they read it later, or it's always different? Or?
It depends. I mean, to me, like, the thing that I love about this project is I, in some ways, am giving people the opportunity to be in the authenticity of that energy. Because for me, giving is all about that. It's all about being honest. It's all about feeling what the moment is, which was another great catalyst for this project, because I found that socially, our relationship to giving felt very contrived to me. It didn't feel like, okay, it's all fine and it's nice that we have all these dates on the calendar by which to give. But to me, giving is so beautiful. Like, why should we put it in a box? Why would we limit it to a certain day? Why would we limit it to that? It's like, if you love people, love them, express that love always. And so even with this, I'm with some people, and some people might ask you, hey, read it. And if you feel called to read it, then read it. Or you might say, hey, I want to read this to you because the moment inspires that, and then you give it to them. or you might, have a moment where some people, the exchange I had the other day, the young woman, she was in a place where she said, you know what, I'm going to save this. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it later. Because that was what the moment called for. So I'm not really encouraging people to put any limitations on how they feel called to do it. The whole point is that it gets to be an expression from your heart, and that's what matters.
So awesome. So I know you also do you work with people like one-on-one and stuff like that. So like, how can people contact you? Like, if they listen to this interview, they're like, man, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like, how can I contact this guy?
Best way for people to get a hold of me would probably be to send me an email. My email address is really simple. It's thankful.andrew@gmail.com. And if people are interested in getting some coaching work or mentorship, they can do it that way. Just send me a message.
What would you call like the coaching work or mentorship? Like, could you just talk about that?
Like for me, primarily, it's mindfulness and empowerment coaching. I'm one who is really big on personal empowerment. And once again, as I kind of touched on earlier in our conversation, empowerment of self, right? Not power over other people, but to be in your truest essence and authentic state, knowing that that's going to be the source of your happiness and creativity and abundance, and knowing that that space inside of you doesn't live in time. So much of our energy is in time. It's like, what kind of career should I have? And we think it's like, okay, what kind of careers exist? Okay, I'll choose one of those. It's like, when you're personally empowered, you make your own career up.
Yeah.
You make up your own titles, just like we were talking the other day. I said, where did the people who created college go to college?
I love that.
Guess what? They were personally empowered. They decided, hey, I didn't need to go to school to create a school, right? And so for me, I'm really big on that. And part of one of the keys to that is just awareness. There are a lot of practices that I have in my life that I offer to other people and encourage other people to take on. But it has to come from listening. Everybody's so unique, and everybody's journey is so unique, and what somebody's receptive to here is very different than the person over there. And so, anything that I can do to meet people where they're at to help inspire them in the direction of where they want to be, assuming that it feels like it's in the highest for everybody, then I'm in support of that.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on the Welcome Vitality podcast. Hopefully have you back on the show again.
Yeah, whenever. You let me know.
Yeah, guys. So giveloveproject.com if you want to email Andrew. Thankful.andrew@gmail.com. Thanks for joining, guys. And have an amazing day. Be well. Be happy. Be safe. Hey, if this was your first time listening to the Welcome Vitality podcast, it was great having you. And if you'd like to stay updated on the show, you can head over to welcomevitality.com and subscribe to my newsletter. I always send out an email whenever a new show comes out. I'm usually interviewing people on alternative health, spirituality, and if you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe and leave a rating. That helps out the ratings of the show, and it just helps spreading these messages into the world relating to lifting our consciousness, expanding awareness, talking about yoga, alternative health, and healing modalities. So that would be great if you could help out. And if you would like to be interviewed on the Welcome Vitality podcast, you can send me an email to john@welcomevitality.com. I'd love to email you. I would love to hear from you. And thanks so much for joining us on the Welcome Vitality podcast.